This episode is brought to you by Battleborn Batteries, the best name in the RV and marine industry. These lithium batteries are designed and assembled in the USA, backed by a 10-year warranty. The best solution for your battery anxiety, so go check them out at battlebornbatteries.com.
You are listening to Beyond the Wheel, a podcast about the people and ideas that drive the RV community forward.
Hi, everyone. Today we have our first returning guest, Jamie Sorenson from Winnebago's Specialty Vehicle Department. Jamie is going to tell us all about the electric vehicle being used for commercial use in areas such as mobile blood drives, classrooms, and medical applications. So let's jump into this conversation with Jamie.
Okay, welcome back to the podcast, Jamie. You are our second-time guest on the podcast. But for those who have missed the first episode, which I'm sure they're going to go back and listen after they hear this, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Winnebago?
Sure. Yep. Happy to be back. I'm super excited to be back for a second time and be the first second timer. Yeah, I had an absolute blast with you guys the first time we went around. So I'm Jamie Sorenson. I'm the Director of Advanced Technology for Winnebago. When we did our first interview, I was the Director of Specialty Vehicles and Advanced Technology. In those couple months since then, I've gotten to transition out of specialty vehicles into the full-time role of advanced technology, and I'll kind of talk about that here in a minute, or let you guys ask me about that, I guess. But so there's been a little bit of a change for me as far as my function at Winnebago, but it's continuing on a lot of the same things that I was doing before with our specialty vehicle division, except in a more focused way.
Can you kind of explain the difference between advanced technology and specialty vehicles?
Sure. Yeah. So in a nutshell, specialty vehicles is a business unit. We're in the business of creating special vehicles one at a time. Most part, those are mobile medical vehicles. So think blood mobiles, dental offices, mobile eye exams, mammography, computed tomography, so CT scanners. So that's our medical is our probably 70% of our business in specialty vehicles. And then the other 30% is made up of bookmobiles, other specialty odd applications. We recently completed a really cool food truck for the Minnesota Vikings. So things like that, but it's still focused around community outreach type things is kind of the normal. And then advanced technology is not a business unit. That's a new division of Winnebago where we're looking and exploring for how we might collaborate with outside partners for technology, innovative type things 3 and 5 years down the road for Winnebago. So it's kind of a little bit of a skunk works operation. We're in the early parts of standing this division up within Winnebago. So it's a pretty small team, and by small I mean there's a couple of us. So yeah, it's probably a little bit more in tune with my skill set, I would say, than operating a business on a day-to-day basis.
What we're going to talk about today is electric vehicles. Does that still fit into your new position?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, yep. So I'm still actively involved in the initial setup and launch of our electric vehicles that we did for specialty vehicles. There's a lot of passion and a lot of personal leverage that went into making sure that this is going to be successful for Winnebago. So I'm still seeing quite a few projects go through. As far as developing new technologies, yeah, that's kind of in my wheelhouse. What will we be doing next for electric vehicle technology? What's the electric vehicle industry going to be doing? How is battery technology going to improve? Infrastructure going to improve? All those types of things that'll make further electrification possible someday.
How did Winnebago get started with the all-electric vehicle? Was this an idea that you had, or did somebody come to Winnebago and say, hey, can you guys do this for us?
So interestingly enough, I've had a little bit of hybrid electric vehicle experience back in my college days, so late 80s, early 90s. I participated in a hybrid electric vehicle program through the university that I attended with Ford Motor Company. And that was just, kind of a brief glimpse into that. I was a little bit of a gearhead when I was a teenager, and I still am, I guess. But that stuff fascinated me back then. When I came into Winnebago, it was kind of an indirect relationship through a guy named John Knutson. And John Knutson is currently the business development director at Morgan Olson. John is from the Forest City area. He actually worked for Winnebago for a time. But at the time that I met John, he was working with Motive Power Systems, which is our electric vehicle partner. So we made this connection at a bus conference when Winnebago was manufacturing transit buses at the time. John and I kind of hit it off. We had a lot of things in common. We know a lot of the same people just growing up in this area of Fort City, Iowa. And then he introduced me to the technology that Motive had. And I'm like, this is really cool. I wish I had an application for it. And in the meantime, we were in the process of selling our transit bus division, which we did. But then we still had our specialty vehicle division that has been with Winnebago since basically 1967. When we built our first clinic way back when. So anyhow, I've got these ideas in my head, and I'm at a conference. It's the annual blood bank conference. So it's where we would go to show a bloodmobile. And I'm talking to a potential customer at the show, and he's from Northern California, and he says, "What can you do for me for an alternative power source?" He said, "I'm going to have trouble licensing a diesel vehicle in my area in the next few years." And he said, "If I buy a new bloodmobile, which I need one, I might not be able to license it in 3 years, and I don't know what to do." And I said, "Well, we've worked on solutions for compressed natural gas, so CNG. We worked on some solutions for liquid propane, so LPG." And he said, "What about electric?" And the light bulb went off. I'm like, I know a guy. and then the relationship with Motive started to materialize. Everything all the stars started to align, and we put together our first EV project. So that's how we got started. Was a conversation at a bloodmobile show.
That sounds perfect, though. I mean, that sounds like the perfect birthplace for this.
Right. Yeah. Yep. It fits in with our strategy completely. Yeah.
So are these still considered specialty vehicles, or are they now? Are you guys doing electric vehicles like on a production basis?
Yeah, so our electric vehicle line is still a commercial vehicle through the specialty vehicle division. So these are still, while they're built in a similar manner to the rest of our motorized production, they're still through the specialty vehicle division. So they're still a little bit unique. They're not similar to other things that we build from a chassis standpoint, but in some respects they are very similar. But we haven't quite crossed that bridge of, okay, we're ready to put an electric chassis into the main production line of our motorhome plant, where we do the rest of our chassis production and shell production for specialty vehicles. So we're kind of in that weird, the awkward teenager phase, I would say.
I always say it's an all-electric vehicle, Jamie, but is that really true? Is it all electric? Is there any gas generator or anything like that? Like our motorhomes that we travel in for living, we have a generator. If we're unplugged from shore power, we can fire up the generator and run our AC units and stuff like that. Is there a generator in the all-electric vehicles?
Nope, it is 100% battery power. So
the
traction batteries that are located between the frame rails, we're able to take power from those and convert that for electricity for use inside the car. That fine balance of making sure that it's the right fit for the customer. If we were to try and put an electric vehicle in an area of the country where you were really dependent on a lot of air conditioning, or if we go the other extreme, really far north where we need a lot of heat, those are going to be the things that are going to draw a lot of power, are going to be your climate controls. And then that's where we effectively start losing range. Because we are range limited currently, the battery technology is improving, but not to the point where we're ready to say you're safe to go and do whatever you want to with this vehicle at this point.
What is the range? Since you brought up range, I'm curious, how far can you ride around town with it?
Yeah, so we advertise the range at 85 to 125 miles. And that gap in there kind of accounts for your energy demand inside the vehicle. What are you going to be providing for electrical services within the vehicle? So for example, our first deployment, which we're going to be doing a press release on here pretty soon, is out in California. But it's the temperature swing where this vehicle is going to be going, it doesn't change a whole lot. So it's pretty temperate there. It's warm, not too warm. It's cool, but it's not too cool. So we're going to be able to get quite a bit of range out of that vehicle.
Does it have house batteries on top of the power plant, or is the power plant does all the conversions and everything like that on its own?
So without getting too far in the weeds on that one, so the native battery voltage, the traction batteries, is a little over 500 volts DC. We do have house batteries in terms of what you would quote unquote call a house battery, only for the simple fact that we need to use a DC-DC converter to get down to a 12-volt source so that we can put 12-volt items within the coach, lights, maybe an awning, something like that.
Can you do that in one step, the 500 down to 12?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, you can.
Oh, wow.
I never even heard of a DC to DC converter before.
Yeah. I mean, that was
Makes sense, though.
Yeah, you think 10 years ago, everything about the coach was 12 volts already. And yeah, we fast forward 10 years later, and we're using a lot of DC-DC converters. When you think about the Pure 3 system that we're installing in our Travados and our Bolts, we use a DC-DC converter because the native voltage of that battery is 48 volts, and we need to bring that down to 12 volts as well.
Yeah, I know a lot of people use it with solar applications as well. They have to use a DC to DC converter. If they're running like a 48 volt system, they need to step it down to 12. So it goes 85 to 125, depending on what other energy is required inside the vehicle. How do you recharge it? Is it like like the same plug as like a Tesla would have or any other electric vehicle, or is it some special plug that you need a special charging station for?
The answer is yes. So, and let me, I'll kind of expand on that. So our initial development on the first few vehicles that we've done has been around a battery chemistry that's a sodium nickel chemistry. Which is very popular in Europe. It's been used for a few decades over there. It's very popular in marine applications. In the United States, it doesn't have quite that same amount of notoriety. But that battery charges at a 208 three-phase. So it's a high voltage AC in three-phase, which isn't very common. I find that in commercial buildings, which for the most part ties in with the fleet aspect of where a lot of the electric vehicle companies are looking, and by fleet aspect, I'm talking about delivery vans, school buses, transit buses. They've got applications for that. Our customers, however, don't necessarily have that type of electrical service. But our first initial vehicles do have that 208 three-phase. We're switching currently now to a single-phase charger, which uses the J1772 plug, which is the industry standard plug that you'll find on a Nissan Leaf, Chevy Volt, WI series, so it's very common. Tesla has a proprietary charger, so we wouldn't be able to tie into anything that has the big T on it, but it's compatible the other way. So Tesla would be able to tie into a J1772.
So does switching from three-phase to a single phase increase the charging time?
Slightly. Yep. So it really all depends on the amount of amps that you have available to the charger. So if we can when we're charging the vehicles here at Winnebago, we're charging them at 80 amps. And in 80 amps, if it's a completely depleted battery, you're looking at about 6 to 8 hours. And by completely depleted, you still have about 10 to 20% charge left in that battery. If you run it all the way down, any battery all the way down to zero, it really has some negative effects. So there's software that protects the battery systems. But yeah, 6 to 8 hours on a three-phase charger at 80 amps. When we switch to a single phase, we're probably going to still be right around that 60 amp service. So our charge times might go out a little bit farther. So maybe instead of 6 to 8, maybe we'll be more like 8 to 10. But that all depends on the level of input of the charger.
Which is still not very long of a charge time, I would think. There's how many batteries are on these chassis? We
do 6 battery systems and 8 battery systems currently.
Yeah, that's not bad, really.
No, and for the use case of our customers, they're still going to be parked overnight.
Right.
So it shouldn't interfere with their duty cycle of the vehicle.
That's what I was going to ask you. So Jamie, somebody that's purchasing this and then using it for a blood drive vehicle, they're driving it to the location, they got that range, and then once they get to their location, they're able to they're plugging it in, and then everything that's inside that vehicle is being operated just normally through plug-in.
It could be, is how
Okay.
We go through a pretty extensive profile of the customer and a day in the life of the customer. So we can get an idea, okay, what is your exact route that you plan on running? And with a bloodmobile is a good example. Bloodmobiles are always running the same routes. They're always going to go to the same locations because when people are coming to donate blood, they don't want to, they want to make sure they know exactly where they're going. So bloodmobiles are usually typical fixed routes. So we'll take a look at their routes. We'll try and figure out what their energy usage is going to be in transit, how many hours of operation they want to have in that location, and then what it looks like to get back to home base.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In the event that we think that they're going to come up shy on the number of kilowatt hours required to perform that day, then we would suggest what we would call convenience charging, which would be have a charger installed at that location so that you can recharge the traction batteries. Now, what you're talking about with like a short cord, that is possible too. We could do an automatic transfer switch into the power panel for the interior of the coach, which would bypass that DC to DC converter, supplying power to the interior of the coach. And then we could, do a regular 30 amp or 50 amp, what everybody in the RV world is used to for a shoreline to power the interior. So there's a whole lot of different paths to accomplish the same goal.
And that's something that you guys, like almost like a consultation. They're talking to you. They're letting you know exactly what they're looking for, and then you guys can offer, I guess, these options.
It is, yeah. It's a lot more in-depth conversation that we have on the front end with customers and potential customers. Just for that simple reason. I mean, you think about a few years ago, you just put in a big generator, and that big generator was big enough to cover whatever you needed to do. So your limiting factor became how many gallons of fuel can I put in the fuel tank? Now we have to think about it in a different way. It doesn't mean that it's impossible or not doable. It's just different thinking than what we're used to.
So then the chassis that you guys are getting from, is it Motive? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so we're using a Ford F53 chassis. So it's the same chassis that we've always been using for our gasoline versions of our specialty vehicles. And then we do the conversion here at Winnebago. So it's a little bit of an inefficient operation because we're not able to have enough volume at this point to get a glider chassis from Ford, which would be a chassis without the drivetrain installed. So we have to remove the engine, transmission, fuel cell, the emissions controls. Luckily, we, because of our relationship with some of our dealers and our factory service, we're able to repurpose a lot of that equipment, a lot of those engine and transmissions into vehicles that might need some type of service. So we've had really good luck from that respect, and we're not discarding brand new engines as soon as we receive them, but we do have to remove all that stuff and then install the electric conversion.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense. I actually thought that when you got the chassis from Motive, it already had all that stripped off of it and it already had the batteries in it and the new powertrain in it. And
that was the original thinking. And Motive does do that for certain customers. But because we are doing a few different options, and those few different options make us a little bit unique to Motive's other customers, and Motive's other customers would be like step vans, delivery type vans, where it's very repeatable. There's nothing that basically changes about that. Or maybe a small transit bus application where it's always the same every time and there's not a whole lot of change that goes on. But there's just enough differentiation in our product where it made it really inconvenient for them to supply us with a chassis. And because of our experience at Winnebago and the things that we're capable of doing here in Forest City, it just made sense for us to start doing it ourselves. And once we start doing it ourselves, the guys from Motive came in, they took a look at it and they said, oh, this is perfect. You guys, you know what you're doing. This is all great. And we support this 100%.
For the drivetrain part of the chassis, you take of course, the gas or diesel engine out and the transmission. And then you replace that with just one big electric motor or?
No, there's one single motor, and we only do this to a gasoline-powered chassis. So we're only doing it to the F53 Ford chassis. But yeah, we remove everything, and then we put an electric motor. It's by TM4, which is owned by a corporation called Dana. And the motor of that, I would say, is probably about 24 inches in diameter, and it sits just in front of the rear axle. And then we have a short drive shaft, maybe about 2.5 to 3 feet long. So everything is very compact and right in front of the rear axle. That opens up the rest of the engine bay where the engine and transmission used to sit. So we're able to put some batteries up there, some of the power controllers, and then we scatter the batteries throughout the frame based on where the frame rail cross members are and where we've got opening spaces.
And Ford's planning on updating the F53 chassis. They've been using it for like the last 20 years. Will that affect you guys at all? Will you have to take a look at the new chassis and rework things to match it?
Yeah, there will be a little bit of redesign. So we're expecting that new F53 chassis to finally be available for us to purchase and build on, I think, beginning in January of 2020. But we do have a really good relationship with Ford. We've gotten a preview of those chassis. We actually built some test vehicles for Ford over the last couple of years using that chassis. So we've seen the frame rails. We know how the packaging is going to look. And so right now we're going through the engineering process of getting ready for that shift that we'll see in January of next year.
So you're already ahead of the curve.
Yep. Yeah.
And then these vehicles obviously require probably less maintenance than a traditional gasoline motor and transmission. When these vehicles require service, do they have to come back to Winnebago for whatever maintenance issues they need on as far as the batteries and motor go?
No, so that's one of the really cool parts about what we're doing here is we basically turn it into a giant computer on wheels. So it becomes almost a solid state machine to a degree. So in terms of what you need to be mindful of for maintenance, you'll have one belt up in the front of the vehicle, and that's an electric motor that powers the power steering pump, because we still have to provide power steering to the vehicle. So you'll have one belt, and then you'll have your brakes and suspension. You'll have a couple grease fittings for the drive shaft, and that's it. There's no more fluids to check. The batteries and power controllers. The power controllers, more than the batteries, have liquid coolant, but the liquid coolant is standard, the biodegradable version of antifreeze that we're using this year. The name escapes me. Dexcool is what we're using, but it's very low pressure, very low volume. So there's an electric pump that drives that. So we don't have extreme changes in temperature of the coolant. So the coolant system is pretty well a sealed unit. So yeah, our estimated savings in maintenance compared to what people are used to is about 80 to 85% less, just because of the removal of the complex systems of spark plugs and oil and transmission clutch packs and all that good stuff that goes along with it.
I like the sound of that. That just sounds so much easier and just less stressful and just less things to go wrong.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And you can look at it in terms of, we're stretching the life of the brake system as well, because we've got regenerative braking through the electric motor.
Oh, that's nice.
Whenever you lift your foot off of the accelerator, it goes into a regen mode and applies, basically takes the spinning momentum of the drive shaft and feeds that backwards through the electric motor, generating electricity. So it's putting a little bit of power back into the batteries while you're slowing down. But at the same point, it's also putting a drag on the system, so you've got that effective regenerative braking effect.
It's sort of like an engine brake or something.
Yeah, very, very similar to a drivetrain brake. Yep.
And does do each of the batteries have their own management system, or are they all tied into one?
That's one of the cool features about Motive, and they've wrapped a patent around their battery management structure. So each battery is individually managed by its own power controller. So in the event that you would have some type of maybe a cell failure or maybe some type of degradation within a battery pack that would be out of the normal, it doesn't affect the performance of the other batteries.
Okay.
We've seen instances, not personally at Winnebago, but we've seen instances where you might have a high mortality rate, or an infant mortality rate, I should say. I shouldn't say high. Mm-hmm. Infant mortality rate of a battery pack. That might be like 0.5%. And that 0.5% would be one battery pack out of however many thousands of battery packs. But if that one battery pack fails, you'll still have 5 battery packs or 7 battery packs still providing power to that vehicle. So there was a good story about this. Ameripride out in Los Angeles has got some step vans from Motive. They had a battery that went bad. And by the way, I should also point out the fact that the systems on these vehicles are monitored remotely, so that there's always information being sent from the vehicle back to Motive, and they're able to monitor the vehicle. If there's any type of issue that arises with a battery, a cell temperature, power controller, it has something going bad within it, or any other type of issue that sends a red flag, that gets reported back to Motive. Motive reports back to the fleet owner or the fleet operator, and then they make arrangements. If it's a plug and play swap of a component, or if it's something that they can fix through software, then they can do that remotely. So to answer your question, your original question was, does anything have to come back to Winnebago to be serviced? No. That took a long way of getting around that one.
Perfect. You had mentioned the brakes and how they regenerate power and stuff like that. So are they completely different brakes than what you would find on the F-53 chassis, or are they the same brakes? It's just the drivetrain that's causing that braking system.
That's absolutely correct. It's the same brake package that you have on the F-53. The braking effect comes from the motor on the drivetrain. So
Okay.
it's like what Sean pointed out, kind of an engine brake.
So then brakes and things like that, you could just take it to any Ford dealership or anything like that to swap for brake replacement and things like that.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. So Motiv is kind of unique in the fact that they're QVM certified through Ford, and QVM is Qualified Vehicle Modifier. So they provide documentation to us, and we can provide that documentation back to our customers that says that we've got Ford's blessing to do what we're doing. That maintains all of the original warranty from Ford for the components that are left on the vehicle. So, and the components left on the vehicle would be suspension, brakes. The CAN bus architecture is still there so that we can report into the dash cluster and be able to provide information back. So those types of things still fall under Ford warranty.
The torque on the electric motor is probably greater than the torque that's in the original Ford engine. Do you guys do anything to step down that torque, or people just, the bus drivers just naturally get used to driving with that amount of torque on the front end?
Yeah, so everything associated with acceleration and pedal input is controlled through software.
Oh,
so
okay.
We're able to soften that up, and we're able to open it up. So, for example, when we did our first one here at Winnebago a year ago, we went ahead and ran that up to 100% just to see what it would do. And yeah, you spin the tires on it. It wasn't too much of a challenge for it, but then it was also an unloaded vehicle. But anyhow, there's a considerable amount more torque than a gasoline engine, just because you've got that direct torque straight into the driveline. You don't have those frictions that occur throughout the engine and slippage through the transmission that you're normally used to. But yeah, so we can throttle that back. I think we ship everything at, if I remember correctly, we're shipping everything between 75 and 80%, and then we can scale that up and down depending on what the use case is. So if you want to have that vehicle governed to 45 miles an hour, say it's an urban application, and you don't have a reason for them to go over 45 miles an hour, we can limit that. We can limit the acceleration curve so that it's more of a really soft pedal, and it takes them a little while to get up to speed, or we can give it everything it's got and let her rip.
I would imagine that would also help with the range. If you would soften that throttle where they're not like doing quarter-mile racing down the street, that it would increase the range, or I guess vice versa. If they did want a little bit of a stronger throttle, I guess it's decreasing the range. But you guys can play with those numbers.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, that's absolutely true. And training for driving an electric vehicle, I mean, it operates the same way that you would drive the same vehicle if it was gas powered or internal combustion powered. But there's different nuances of how you would drive to gain the most efficiency while you're driving. So just like you said, that soft pedal acceleration, learning how to single pedal drive so that you're not using the brake is kind of a cool technique that we see a lot of people adapt to, so that they get used to that level of brake regeneration to the point where they can anticipate how long it's going to take them to come up to a stop sign or stoplight, and they're just not using their brakes at all anymore, which extends the life of the braking system.
So is the electric chassis, when you guys are finished, before you put anything else in it, is it heavier or is it lighter than if it was a gas motor with the transmission and a fuel tank?
That's a great question. So the net gain in weight on our 6 battery system is about 1,500 pounds. On our 8 battery system, it's about the same. And that doesn't sound like the math shakes out, but it's also a bigger vehicle. More chassis and more weight of the body to account for. So the powertrain package itself, net for net, is about 1,500 pounds.
So these vehicles that you guys are manufacturing now are mostly for commercial use and not really for recreational RV use.
We get all kinds of phone calls wanting them for recreational use. Not able to fulfill that dream yet.
What's, I guess, the limiting factor on a recreational vehicle that is built on that chassis?
If you wanted to turn one of these vehicles today into an RV, the limiting factor would be your charging infrastructure. If you had enough charging infrastructure, you could go anywhere, right? So I might only be able to go 100 miles at a time and have to park overnight to recharge. But if I had the charging infrastructure, I could go anywhere.
Okay.
I consider that our limiting factor. How do we overcome that limiting factor of infrastructure would be increasing the range. So how do we increase the range? We increase the amount of kilowatt hours available, which is we either find a new technology of batteries that has a higher charge density, or we just pack more batteries into the system. obviously we've got negative effects. If we put more batteries in, we're just increasing the weight of the vehicle to the point where it's going to be diminishing return, because you'll get to a point where you'll have so many batteries in there that you can't do anything else with the vehicle, like have enough weight left over to get you in or enough capacity. So there's all kinds of different ways to look at it. That it's going to be that trifecta of battery charge density, infrastructure capabilities, and cost. Cost is going to be a limiting factor, obviously, for some people, because it's expensive right now.
Yeah.
As we see more automotive companies shifting towards electric roadmaps in their product line, we're going to see probably a little bit more commonality in battery supply, and battery supply will probably transform into more of a commodity than anything else. We're seeing a lot of alignment between automotive manufacturers in the commercial space. BMW is a good example of that. BMW's automotive roadmap includes making commercially available their i3 and i8 batteries right now. So you're finding BMW batteries popping up in places that don't have anything to do with BMW, and you'll start seeing those in our Winnebagos here pretty soon, because we're going to be switching to that BMW lithium-ion battery on our commercial vehicles in about 6 to 9 months as an option. So we'll still have that sodium nickel battery available, but we'll also be able to offer a lithium ion from BMW, which is a unique relationship that Motive forged with BMW, but they're also in other spaces. But you see other alignments as well. Toyota and Subaru recently came up with a some type of partnership on electric vehicle space based around the batteries. That will kind of be that common alignment, I think.
As the overall electric vehicle industry grows and sort of goes from, I guess they're like at the toddler stage now, but as they increase maybe into their teenage and young adult years, it may be possible in the next 15 to 20 years that we could have an affordable electric RV with the range that's more comparable to a traveler.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of truth to that. With any luck, it'll be a little bit sooner than that. There's some other technologies at play, including hydrogen fuel cells. That technology seems to be developing. For the longest time, hydrogen fuel cells have been kind of out there in terms of price. They're just very expensive to produce. We've seen some technologies related around fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells, where you could almost basically print the fuel cell using an inkjet printer, which greatly reduces the cost of a hydrogen fuel cell down to, does it get to a point where you're just replacing fuel cells instead of, it just opens up a whole new different train of thought if you can reduce that price point on hydrogen fuel cells. But all kinds of stuff is happening in that energy space. And I think we'll see a lot of advancement both with batteries and outside batteries within the next 5 to 10 years for sure.
And you guys are, with the work you're doing with the commercial vehicles, you're probably optimizing as you go, optimizing the chassis structure and design as much as you can to be prepared when that technology becomes more affordable and more widely used.
Yeah, that's definitely the strategy here. Apply in a manner that makes sense so that we can continue that research work so that when, as things progress, we're able to integrate it more easily. Yeah, absolutely.
And what about a hybrid version, Jamie, or is that kind of like taking a step backwards?
There's a lot of debate on hybrid, and hybrid technology is definitely out there. I think there's some great applications for hybrid technology. I think one of the things that we look at in terms of, do we go to that intermediate step of a hybrid technology on an RV package? I can't really comment too much on that, but my thinking on that is you're adding a complex system to an already complex system. With the reduction in battery prices that we're seeing and the further increase of infrastructure that we're seeing, I think that we'll get to full electric faster than the return on investment for a hybrid.
Oh, that's good.
You're bolting on cost to an internal combustion engine vehicle where, with a full EV, you're kind of skirting around that internal combustion engine cost. I think from a value standpoint and from an economic standpoint, we'll get to full EV faster.
Oh, that's good news. You said that you had 2 different size chassis. I guess they're different length chassis, right?
Correct. Yep.
And then what are, other than a blood drive vehicle, what are some of the other vehicles that you had mentioned a food truck? Was that an all electric food truck or was that something completely different?
That was something completely different. So in terms of our projects with electric vehicles, I talk about the Bloodmobile, and that's kind of where we launched into that space was down the path of a Bloodmobile. Our first deployment is a mobile surgical instrument lab. So basically a giant autoclave on wheels out in California. Our second deployment is going to be a mobile classroom. So this one still doesn't fit the mold. Third, fourth, and fifth deployments are going to be mobile asthma treatment clinics in California. So kind of a neat program out there that we've been involved with. And we'll have some press releases coming on all that stuff in the future. I'd love to tell you all kinds of more information on the stuff, but yeah, we got to leave a little bit of meat on the bone.
So are you guys shipping these to various locations then across America? It's not all just California. Is it another location? Like, where are they going?
So primarily California, and
Okay.
that has a lot to do with the incentives that are available in the state of California. Their hybrid and electric vehicle incentive program, which is called HVIP, their program is really robust and funded very well. So our vehicles automatically qualify for a $90,000 incentive from the state of California. So that's very easily to get, very easily attainable. And then there's also an infrastructure component to that where they'll provide funds for charging stations in California through that same program. Then you get down to the different air quality management districts in California, because they do have a pretty good regulatory body over the air quality management in California. Those air quality management districts may or may not have incentive programs that go in and out of funding. So we've actually seen in the Sacramento area, the Sacramento Municipal Air Quality Management District, big mouthful of words to say there, but they'll actually tag on another $100,000 of incentives to the purchase of the vehicle. So you'd be getting $190,000 back in incentives through their program. So it's just, so California really has a lot of people's focus. Our second deployment, the one I was talking about, the mobile classroom, that's actually going to Colorado. They were able to receive funding through the VW settlement funds through Alt Fuels Colorado for about $200,000 worth of that vehicle to be paid for through that funding. So a little bit of a good story there. We always hear about the emission scandal that VW went through, and all the billions of dollars that they had to pay for. And we actually have a good story behind that of something. It's going to be a mobile preschool for disadvantaged children because of that funding. So kind of a cool story.
That's great. Yeah.
We've spent the summer out in California this year, and just about every parking lot has EV charging stations. There's more there than I've ever seen in any other state. So I can see why California is pushing for that kind of technology. It's just with their environmental standards, it just fits with that state more than any other, I think, right now.
It does, yeah, it absolutely does, and because of the air quality in some of these areas, one of my favorite examples is Kern County, which is just north of downtown LA. They've got a staggering statistic. I can't remember exactly what it is, but and please don't quote me on this, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 in every 6 elementary age school children has an inhaler just because of the air quality in that county. So you think about the brown cloud and you think about the smog, and it really has a lot of devastating effects on the population. So if we can get away from those tailpipe emissions and become more a little bit more conscious about the gases that we're pumping into the air, a lot of things can change.
So now for Kenny and Sabrina, I got to ask this last question. The one thing that I think they would like to see is not only an electric recreational vehicle, but an electric self-driving recreational vehicle, so they could just stay in bed while they're going down the road.
The question of autonomy and the proposal of a hotel on wheels.
Yes.
Fall asleep in one state and wake up in another state. I'll comment a little bit on that. That technology will exist someday. You think about what people are doing with autonomy, and you kind of look at agriculture as that white space of autonomy. They're able to do a lot of interesting things in off-road construction applications and agriculture, because they're operating in wide open spaces that don't have, there's nothing that says I can't make a right turn in the middle of this field. So we look a lot at what agriculture is doing in terms of autonomy and self-driving. And then that in turn goes to a lot of military applications. There's companies out there that can basically autonomize anything to a certain extent. And we already see a degree of autonomy in our vehicles today. You know, it's that level 1, level 2 autonomy of collision avoidance in our new vehicles, or adaptive cruise control. You know, those are all levels of autonomy that will constantly build one on top of the other. It's coming. How fast it's coming, I'm not sure. You know, Waymo is obviously making some noise. Uber's making some noise with what they're doing. Tesla's making some noise with their autopilot feature. So there's all kinds of good stuff out there, and yeah, Kenny and Sabrina, you will have the opportunity, I feel, in my lifetime to experience that.
Hey, that's a much better answer than I thought. You were just going to blow that off and say, no, we're not even looking into it. Come on, stop being foolish.
I think the limiting factor here is going to be what's the safety constraint of sleeping in your bed while you're going down the road.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Bell will wake you up if anything happens.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think that's all of our questions for you today, Jamie. Is there anything that you think that we might have missed, or that you would like to highlight, or just chit-chat about?
Oh gosh, I don't know. At Winnebago, we're gearing up for our Grand National Rally, which kicks off this weekend. Kenny and Sabrina, you guys will be here on Monday for the week next week. So everything's full throttle around here in Forest City, Iowa, regarding our Grand National Rally. And that, you know, the people have already started coming in. We've got a lot of vehicles already on the rally grounds as of last week. And that'll continue on for probably a week after the rally. So lots of things going on here regarding that. Yeah, just excited for the next week or so, and definitely continuing on with the work that we're going to be doing with advanced technology and specialty vehicles.
And if people are interested in looking at the electronic vehicle, is there a way for them to look at it online?
Yeah, so you can go to winnebagoind.com, and you can go to specialty vehicles, and that'll take you to our electric vehicle page, so you can get some more information on our electric vehicles through there.
Okay.
That's going to be the best way to find the information. If you're coming to Forest City next week for the rally, we won't have an electric vehicle on display. Unfortunately, our production is really ramping up, and we've got a lot of stuff in production, but we don't have anything that we can run around across the street. So I apologize for that.
That was going to be a question. I was curious.
Yeah.
That's all right. We'll still get to see you.
Yeah. Hey, what did you ask for, right?
It's still a win.
Well, thanks so much, Jamie. And I'm sure you will be our first third-time guest at some point in the future.
I'm looking forward to that day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate Winnebago, and specifically Jamie, for coming back on the podcast. Kenny and I would really appreciate it if you could leave a rating or review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. Also, be sure to follow us on our website, Instagram, or Facebook. We will be back with another episode in 2 weeks. Safe travels.
This episode is brought to you by Battleborn Batteries, the best name in the RV and marine industry. These lithium batteries are designed and assembled in the USA, backed by a 10-year warranty. The best solution for your battery anxiety. So go check them out at battlebornbatteries.com.